The first speaker will be Ofer. Hi. Ofer has 7 years of experience leading business-related research efforts and teams. In his last position, he was leading the research in Soluto, which was abruptly shut down. And now he's joining ServiceNow as a staff UX researcher. Nice. And as the first researcher in the Israeli site. He has a master in social psychology, and he co-founded my favorite Facebook community, together with more people who are here. Social psychology in the real world. And don't look for it in English because it's in Hebrew, פסיכולוגיה חברתית בעולם האמיתי. Yeah. Okay, the stage is yours.
Yes. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sigal, for the kind introduction. And it is really great to see everyone here. So today we'll talk about how to establish OKR framework for research teams. But maybe let's start by talking a little bit about the challenges of being a researcher. So all of us who are doing research know that we work across the organization. That means we work with multiple teams and we have to step inside new contexts often. We also support efforts from all different stages of the product development lifecycle, which means we change pace very rapidly. Sometimes we have to work very fast, and sometimes we have to slow down and drill in depth. And while doing all of this, we have to find the time to invest in our research capabilities, advocate for research culture, and obviously find ways to integrate ourselves in strategic efforts. So, challenging as it may, we have all kinds of methods and practices to cope with this and navigate through this fog. We use all kinds of prioritization matrices, and we seek the feedback from our stakeholders, managers, and leadership in order to kind of see how it goes and do we invest ourselves in what's important to the organization. So I've been doing the same at Soluto, but after a while, I started feeling that the way we manage our resources is too reactive as opposed to proactive, and also that we couldn't really measure our success. So even if our stakeholders were quite happy with the deliverables we provided them with, that doesn't mean that we have succeeded in our ultimate goal, which made us think, what is the ultimate goal? And we started thinking of it more as something like maximizing the way that our skills and resources promote goals of the organization. And so with that in mind, we seek some kind of a model to support this. And we started by looking at OKRs. So that's why today we're going to talk about OKRs and how establishing them enabled us at Soluto to, first of all, create a research North Star. That means we had a way to manage our resources, plan ahead, invest in long-term capabilities, and also seek for strategic efforts. And also to have a seat at the table. That means that, first of all, we could create an agreement on what's the role of research within the organization. And that helped us also to raise demands and needs in order to get there, and to be able to better identify opportunities for strategic contributions. So to talk about all of this, we'll go over a brief alignment of what are OKRs, why so many companies are using that, and then drill down on how to actually apply OKRs for research. And I'll wrap things up by providing a few examples of how it helped us be a better research team. So let's dive into that. OKRs are objective and key result, and obviously objective is where the business wants to go, and the key result is basically how we plan to get there. Setting goals, OKR, usually start by senior leadership dictating or deciding on a company OKR. Then teams and individuals determine the best way that they can have an impact towards that goal. Yeah. This basically empowers teams and individuals to apply most of their talent, and resources towards a predefined organizational goal while keeping everything measurable and transparent across the organization. So let's look at an example. Let's say you work in a B2C company and you want to increase the revenues. Pretty straightforward. This clear objective is then followed by key results. So the organization might decide we want to increase sales and reduce churn. Again, pretty straightforward. Ultimately, each department or team decide on the best way that they can contribute to these results. So marketing might say, we want to triple the number of leads, but product will focus on providing more customers with immediate value within 7 days. So that's basically the logic behind OKRs and why it is so successful. But how does it apply for research? So obviously, as researchers, we work with multiple teams, but that doesn't mean we can own all of their objectives. So in that sense, our ultimate objective is more to assist those teams in achieving their own OKRs. And if we want to assist them, and that's our ultimate goal, then to integrate OKR framework for research means we have to translate what it means to assist in terms of objectives. So to do so at Soluto, we started thinking about what are the main pillars through which we provide the organization with value. What are the things that we do that contribute value, and how do we divide it into main categories? And we identified 3 categories that are distinct, that we've noticed that everything we do, every effort we participate in, can fall into each and one of them. So we'll go over this, and these are the objectives for our research team. So we said our mission is to assist teams achieve their OKRs. And these are the 3 pillars, the 3 objectives that we have identified. And I'll go over them one by one. So the first one is everyday decisions. The second is velocity. And the third, informed strategy. So let's talk about everyday decisions. Everyday decisions is practically everything you do that support those efforts that are within the in-cycle or in-sprint efforts, those user tests you do to determine which version make more sense to users, uncover needs and expectations for new flow or prioritize feature. And in that sense, we created this objective as teams will be more impactful and efficient by making more research-based decisions during cycle efforts. The second one is velocity. And this one is all about making the organization move faster. So one of our ultimate goals at Soluto was to reduce time to market and basically help teams create hypotheses quicker and test them quicker. So examples for efforts like this would be infrastructure to enable scheduling interview with users in 5 days instead of 2.5 weeks, or creating a live intercept capability to test our users on online experiences, or even just having an accessible knowledge center. All of these fall in velocity. And the objective here is to increase teams' velocity for product development and proficiency in product decisions. The third pillar is informed strategy. And this is everything that has to do with roadmaps or uncovering needs or opportunities for growth for the organization. So it might be end-to-end studies that oversees one specific survey coast to coast, and this is crossing multiple departments in the organization, or just having strategic workshops to create product roadmaps or fundamental research. And in that sense, the objective is that leadership and teams will be able to easily use research to define and prioritize product roadmaps, OKRs, and maximize impact. So these are our 3 pillars, the 3 objectives for our research team. And this is how it actually looked within the organizational spreadsheet that included all the team's OKRs. And obviously, you can see also that we have key results. We'll get there in a minute. But first, just a few notes on how we set the objectives and how you can set ones too. So first of all, these are our 3 pillars that we've identified, but that doesn't mean that it has to apply for you. I mean, hopefully I believe that this can still be relevant for many of the research teams, but even if it doesn't mean you cannot integrate OKRs. You can definitely do adjustment, anything that works for you in your organization. Maybe for you, it will be the type of research or the phase in the product development lifecycle. Everything that works for you is great. The second thing is to focus on the organization. So you probably noticed that the way we phrase the objective, I highlighted what's in it for the organization. And that might seem trivial, but it's very important in an OKR framework. So let's take example velocity. We could have said, we want to reduce the time for insight, want to reduce the time from research plans to insight share outs, which make perfect sense as a goal, but it doesn't fit the OKR framework because no one understands what's in it for the organization. Same goes for strategic. Maybe we want to have a quarter of our time spent on strategic efforts, but when you put it this way, no one understands why it should be an objective for the organization. The third thing is that just by doing this, just by stating those 3 pillars, we can already start and plan in a very high level how we spread our resources. So at Soluto, it was obvious for us that we want to dedicate 2/3 of our time today to support day-to-day decisions in the organization, but then still save at least 1/3 of our time for strategic efforts. And we were able to do that by dividing those pillars. So that's great, but how do we set those key results? Let's take an example from the velocity objective. First of all, key results should be specific, measurable. Difficult but not impossible means that by the end of the quarter, you're supposed to achieve about 2/3 of the objective. If you've achieved it within a month, you've probably set them too low. If you haven't been able to even reach a close amount of it, you probably set it too high. So let's take 2 or 3 examples from the velocity objective and see how we translate it into key results. One of the things we want to promote is to help product teams be part of the user testing process. We weren't as free to do every user test in the organization, and we want to provide them with tools to at least set the test, have us review it, and have us discuss it after it's done. And of course, we did all sorts of things. We created 2 steps, hands-on workshop on user Zoom, templates, guidelines, processes, everything about that. But the key result, what we ultimately wanted to achieve, is to have at least 3 user tests that are owned by designers or PM. So this might be seen as very simplified key result, but when you think about it, it holds everything we do was directed to that goal. Same goes for a different team or a different capability we wanted to integrate, which was a pop-up survey or live intercept capability. So we had to do a market review and obviously a lot of meetings with stakeholders and salespersons and have leadership support regarding the resources. And in that sense, again, our key result was to have at least 2 research efforts done with real users intercept. We wanted to achieve that goal, and we want to establish a process that can be copied. And one last example, one of our domains had to do continuous interviewing with internal users. One of our systems, the ones who are using it were people who work for our company. And for that, we had to do a lot of trust establishing and create a process and templates that help them achieve effective interviews within a few days instead of 2.5 weeks. And again, in that sense, our key result was that 80% of those interviews were done through this structured process. And this is how it actually looked when we presented it to our CEO at the end of Q2. And when you look at all those 3 key results together, I think you can definitely understand how investing in capabilities really increased our team's ability to create hypotheses fast and deliver fast results. And I think that this is the essence of using OKRs, is the fact that you can use predefined goals and then make the connection of how they help the organization achieve its goals. So let's just review the steps that I've mentioned here. First of all, make sure that you identify the pillars of value, the main categories through which you provide value to the organization. Second of all, you have to express them in a way that present the value to the organization. You can use this already to try and allocate the resources and say, how much do you want to invest in each one of them? And at the end, you should create key results, again, specific, measurable, and difficult, but not impossible. So that's great. We got some OKRs. Now I want to share some of our experience about how it actually helped us be a better research team. If there are any questions, I don't know if it's part of the later. All right. Okay. So first of all, just by integrating OKRs into our kind of prioritization spreadsheet, we gained a strong sense of ownership on our strategy as a team. We were better able to identify what should we take and what can we say no to and feel good about it because we have an agreement and we have a logic behind it. We could also, by doing that, promote research capabilities faster and save time for our strategic efforts. Using the OKRs also helped us create much better collaboration with our key stakeholders. The entire process of even establishing OKRs means we had meetings with domain leads, head of design, key stakeholder, colleagues, other cross-functional leads, and it created a consensus around what is the role of research in the organization, because everyone might perceive it differently. We also got more familiar with the culture of using OKRs. We understood other teams and other departments in what they want to achieve and what drives them. And we created this transparency that everyone knew what we were working on and why, and it created a cross-organizational alignment. One of the things that we did at Soluto with OKRs was a monthly KR meeting. And this is a meeting where all the senior leadership kind of monitor the status of every key result. And that's a great place to showcase how the team contributes to the organization, but also raise needs and say, hey, we need your support in creating this contract renewal or contracting with a new vendor for creating this new capability. But also, yeah, just to show, hey, we managed to work with 75% of the teams already. And lastly, working with OKRs, there's also a quarterly focus. That means that each quarter, each team inspects how they want to spend the upcoming 3 months and what they want to focus on. So that made us be much more in tuned into organizational shifts and planning ahead how we can contribute best to those organizational goals. So, for example, in terms of strategic, at the end of Q2, we decided that Q2 we're going to focus on helping the leads and PMs formulate product roadmap for the second part of the year. That was our main goal. So, what I want you to take from this talk is basically that you can apply OKRs as well. Now it's a great time to do it. It's December. Most of the teams are working on their own OKRs for 2023, and it's a great time to jump on the train. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to nail it down the first time. It's definitely a learning process and a tool that is supposed to help us feel more in control about the team's goals and how we direct our resources to get there. And the third is that just start with your stakeholders, your immediate, most valuable key stakeholders. Talk to them about you thinking to integrate OKRs in the system? What is their OKRs? How do they see the value of research for their domains or their teams? And only by doing that, I'm sure you'll gain a lot of understanding and create a lot of alignment around what is your goal as researchers. I've also created this public online template that we'll share somehow, maybe through email or any other way that you could use to create your own OKRs. So hopefully you gained something from this talk, and we can have some Q&As later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was great. And I like two things about it, like mainly two things, a lot of things. But one of them is actually really doing these OKRs can really, I think, make you talk to your stakeholders and upper management much more than you might have thought otherwise. I think it's great. And the other thing, I think that it can be useful even if you don't have a research team, right? If you're just product design team and you want to make sure that you're doing research or have your own design operations and design goals that you want to achieve, so we can create OKRs for that as well. Yeah, so I think it's really useful and interesting. Thank you. So yeah, like we said, Q&A will be later. We'll have a panel for questions for both of our speakers because it's really two relevant talks. So the second talk really goes well with this one because it talks about now that we have our goals, we know what we want to do, we know what we want to achieve, how do we actually build a research roadmap that would match it, that would be useful for us, that will make sure that we're doing the right research and the right impact that we want to do. So our second speaker is Valeriya. Okay, she's a senior UX researcher at Prolific. And I was really excited when she told me she's a UX researcher at Prolific because Prolific is a platform for researchers, most academic researchers for surveys. And I think I was one of the first users there. Yeah, pretty sure. And before she worked there, she worked at another research company, sort of ResearchGate, which is also for academic researchers. So you definitely have your own domain. And at ResearchGate, she experienced firsthand the benefits of mixed methods approach to data and development and the passion for user research. Now she's sharing her passion by mentoring aspiring and junior UX researchers and by presenting to us. So to you.
Okay. I'm going to have to learn to juggle this for a second. This is a lot. Okay, this is my presentation. Good start. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I was quite surprised there is so much interest in UX research as it's quite a new field in Israel. So thank you so much for showing interest. Thank you Autodesk and Sigal for organizing and for hosting this. And yeah, thank you Ofer for a wonderful talk on OKRs. As Sigal mentioned, these talks are quite related. So once we have set up our objectives for the next quarter or whatever your timeline is, once we know what our key results are, we need to think about what kind of initiatives are we going to work on, what kind of research projects are we going to work on, and we need to figure out a way to prioritize them in a way that ideally they have impact and ideally you don't have too much unplanned work coming your way throughout the quarter. So when I was practicing this talk, I got the helpful feedback that it would be great to start off with a compelling story. So this is it. It's a dramatic story about UX research gone wrong. I'm taking you back a year where I was one researcher at a company at Prolific, and we had 4 product teams. And I was also working with some non-product stakeholders at the same time. And as you can imagine, I had a lot of requests for research, because we're a research company. So people love research there. It also meant that I had a lot of ad hoc requests and requests that basically of which the deadline was ideally yesterday. It meant that research was sometimes delaying delivery, that was a bit late to the game. It could mean that research was done poorly because there wasn't enough time to do it well. It sometimes meant that research output wasn't actually being used because people were either too impatient to wait for results, or in the chaos of getting so many requests, it was hard to communicate really well what the ideal outcome of the research would be. So this wasn't great. For research, it meant, and I was the only researcher on the team at the time, it meant that I had rarely had the time to see the bigger picture, which is quite awful. This is what researchers should always do. I had little time to connect the dots. It meant that I often overlooked opportunities for great research that could have impact. And those projects that had high impact often had to be postponed because other projects that were less important but more urgent would just be prioritized instead. And so the research functions I felt was perceived as more operational, as we kind of helped doing these transactional things, helped the product teams conduct their research, but we weren't perceived as strategic so much. And that just, in addition, felt like it provided really little growth for me as an individual and for anyone who would join the team later. So just for the research function in the organization. So yeah, this is, you understand the situation. And obviously I realized that it wasn't ideal. And so I set out searching for solutions because user research is quite a new field. I had to look into other areas such as product or engineering for inspiration, for methods and frameworks that I could potentially use to solve this. And so, interesting. And so what I came up with was that having a research roadmap that was collaborative would potentially solve the problems that we experienced. So why did I think that a roadmap was a good idea? Most of you might know roadmaps from, say, a product roadmap, right? So a research roadmap is the same thing. It's just a timeline for upcoming work. And I was hoping that it would improve predictability of projects so that I could plan for upcoming work better. I was also hoping that it would help us with accountability. So comparing what was planned versus what we actually achieved and being able to reflect upon it and how it went and whether it was delivered on time. And finally, I was really looking forward to having a visual representation of the time that was available versus the time that we estimated the work would take. And that would help us not overcommit and be more realistic with our capacity. The reason why I thought collaboration could be a good idea was first and foremost because I was looking forward to having shared ownership of this product with my stakeholders. This basically means that if they're involved in creating this from the start, I don't need to go in after the fact and try to create buy-in. So it might mean a little bit more work from the get-go, but it would actually save me a lot of pain trying to, having created something, then trying to get people on board and trying to get them to use it. I was also hoping that by creating something together, it would get each one of the teams out of their focus on their own deadlines and priorities and get us all aligned on global priorities, on the company objectives. And finally, I thought as a research team that is a very cross-functional function in the organization, we have this unique position where we can help cross-pollination of ideas, we can help everyone build awareness of the knowledge that we're building and just kind of know what kind of projects are going on and what are we learning about our users in other teams. So this is just a really brief sneak peek of the roadmap. I just want you to have something in mind that is concrete, the result of all of this work while I'm talking about it. All you need to know about this right now is that there is clearly an x-axis and a y-axis. And on the x-axis, you have the timeline. So there's the quarters and the months. And then on the y-axis, you have the impact. And so the higher we go on the y-axis, the higher the impact of the project. This is our year in a nutshell. This is 2022, and this is our actual research roadmap. So I would say that this process or this solution did live up to my expectations. It did help us predict timelines better and plan for capacity. It helps us justify deflecting unplanned work because we had this baseline to refer back to. It helps us focus on impactful research. And for me personally, it really increased my job satisfaction because I knew that I was doing work that was impactful. So here, let's go into the nitty-gritty parts of the talk. How do we actually do it? So for us, there were a couple of requirements for this process. For one, we wanted to make sure that the company and product objectives and roadmaps were set before we start our process, or at the very least drafted. So we wanted the PMs to go into this meeting knowing roughly what their priorities are, at least for the next quarter, and having some ideas about the kind of initiatives that we're going to try out in order to get to those objectives. We used a whiteboarding tool, which, oops, sorry. Ooh, went far. This is, okay. We used a whiteboarding tool. We use Miro, but you can obviously, if you wanted to do this, use any other whiteboarding tool that you're familiar with. You need your main research stakeholders in one room or one digital room. So for our organization, we mainly work with PMs and designers. And so all the PMs and designers and researchers are invited to this workshop. And we need 1 hour sync time for the initial workshop together. And then the second part is we need to ongoingly maintain and come back to this roadmap for it to stay relevant. And I just wanted to mention that for a lot of the parts of this solution, I took inspiration from Zach McDonald, who has a talk which is available for free online if you want to watch it. The actual parts of the workshop for us are different, but he was the first person where I heard the term of a collaborative research roadmap. And so it kind of gave me the inspiration to think about whether this might be a good solution for us and what it might look like. So our workshop, the initial workshop to get started, has 4 parts. And they're down here. I realize you can see quite little. We will go into each part later. This is just an overview. So the first part is a brainstorm of research questions or projects. In the second part, we filter out non-research projects and questions that came up in the first part through a prioritization matrix. In the third step, we create the actual roadmap by estimating the timeline and impact of each of those projects. And in the last step, we define the outcomes for each project. So the first step is probably one that most people are familiar with. It's quite a common way to start workshops, which is brainstorming. In this first step, what we're trying to get to was for everyone on this in the workshop to brainstorm their ideas about what research could help them with. It could be research projects they have in mind. It could be questions. We really want to go for sensitivity over specificity here, meaning that we want an exhaustive list as much as possible. We're okay with having a couple of items there that are not actual research projects. We're fine with that. But what we want to avoid is having people hesitate to put something down because they're not sure if it's a research item, and this kind of thing then popping up in the middle of the quarter and creating unplanned work. So really, we just want to get everything out there, everything off your chest. If you're a designer and you're a product manager and you think that research might be remotely, might remotely help with something, you put it down. So here are some concrete examples. We have interviews with partners to understand needs, researcher perception analysis, what data analysis tools are being used. I know that none of you know what this means, and this is okay. This is to illustrate that when at this step of the workshop, I wouldn't know what this means either. So this is why we have subsequent steps. The second step, to me, this is the most interesting one. And this matrix I adopted from Jeanette Fucella. Again, I linked the original source below, who proposed this kind of prioritization matrix to help distinguish research items that research is best placed to own and to solve versus items that other teams might be best placed to own and to solve. So there are 2 main variables here. One is risk, which is the y-axis. I'm not sure what's happening here, but this is not part of the presentation. So the y-axis is risk, and the x-axis is ambiguity. When it comes to risk, Jeanette herself proposes asking yourself, what is the impact if we get it wrong? So is it something that's easily reversible? Then it's probably low risk. Is it something that is difficult to reverse and maybe impacts a lot of our customers or potential customers? That's probably high risk. But the actual most relevant part for us here is the x-axis with ambiguity. And I like to think of ambiguity as unknowns. How many and what kind of unknowns do we have around this project? So if you have a project where you understand the problem quite well, and you know that there are some parts of the problem that you lack clarity on. There's a particular question you have, you still need answered before you're ready to make the final decision. So this is for me low ambiguity because most of the things are known and you already know what you're missing in order to get the complete picture. Versus on the other hand, when low ambiguity for me is when you have a lot of unknowns and amongst them you have some unknown unknowns. So you maybe have a new customer group or a new product where you've never done research before, you have very little knowledge of. And so it's so new that you don't even know what you don't know. You have a hard time anticipating what you might find out if you do the research. So if you have unknown unknowns, do we need to do anything about it?
No.
All good people. Okay. So if you have unknown unknowns and a lot of them, this is high ambiguity. Everything that goes, should I go on? Can people hear me okay? Yeah, cool. Okay, nice. So everything that goes on the right side of this matrix, everything that is high ambiguity is our projects that user research is going to be highly involved in. Everything that goes on the left side are things that user research will not be involved in or not that much. So on this right side, we have either things that are high risk where user research will lead the projects, and it's probably generative research. And then we have something that's lower risk where user research is not going to lead, but they're going to consult and help the teams to do some low-key lean research. On the right-hand side, where the ambiguity is low and we already have quite a lot of knowledge, we're going to look into design leading on these items, or we're looking into maybe ship to learn for things that are both low ambiguity and low risk. We can just build something and see how it goes. So this particular step is super important, especially in the first initial workshop, because it really sets the scene. And if you have a lot of people on your team who haven't worked with user research before and they're not quite sure what to expect and what counts as a research project versus maybe like design exploration or whatnot, this is really helpful. And this is, oops, nope. Thank you. Is it? Okay, it works. Thank you. So this is what our this step looks like after we've done this part. We have gotten rid of quite a lot of things that aren't actually supposed to be owned by research. And we're going on with this part to the next step. So the next step is this main step where we're creating the actual roadmap. Again, on the x-axis, you have the timeline. So it's quite self-explanatory. You have January, February, March, or whatever your timeline is. And on the y-axis, you have the impact. And this is the tricky part because it's quite subjective and it might differ from company to company. In our organization, low impact are projects that are usually relevant for one team and that mostly have disposable insights. So once you have this insight, you were able to make your decision. It's no longer going to be relevant further. Whereas high impact are projects that are relevant for on company level and usually produce long-lasting insights. And medium is just kind of stuff in between. This is the most important step to do collaboratively together. And this is because this is the step where you tend to have a huge bias for every team thinking that their items are the most important and urgent ones. And so everything ends up in this upper left-hand corner of the map. And once they see that, usually they're able to correct the bias themselves. And they're able to keep our global objectives in mind and talk between each other live in this workshop, being like, okay, this is what I mean by my project. What do you mean? Okay, which one is more likely to contribute to our company goals? And so they're able to kind of resolve most of these things amongst themselves. And we as a research team don't have to be going and telling people that their work is not important. And now we come to the last step. Once we have a roadmap, this is a step that came out specifically out of a particular challenge that we had before, which was that sometimes research that was produced wasn't really being used. It didn't happen often, but when it happened, obviously, it was very frustrating, and it's really a waste of effort and capacity. So the reason being usually that there was lack of clarity or miscommunication about what are the specific outcomes, what are the expectations, what kind of decisions are people hoping to make as a result of this research, what is it going to look like, what kind of deliverables they expect. So we wanted to make sure that going forward, for every single request coming our way, before we start working on the research, we have this very clear in our minds, what are we working towards? So let's take this very abstract sticky that says nothing in and of itself. It says research or perception analysis. And let's look at the outcome that was defined by the team here. So for research or perception analysis, the team wanted to understand our current image, how researchers see us at the moment, so that we can use it as a baseline to define our brand and tone of voice. Ideally, have a list of common adjectives or associations as well. So here we see that researchers are our main customers. So here we see that this team is hoping to understand how our customers see us currently so that they can inform our brand and tone of voice. And they also are hoping to get some adjectives to use in probably their marketing materials. So you can see how this gives us a pretty clear idea of where this is going versus researcher perception analysis. So having read this, we now understand that this is probably really high impact. Something that impacts our whole company brand and tone of voice is going to be relevant for all of our customers. It's going to be seen by all of our potential customers. So there's rarely a research project that has higher impact than this, basically. And this helps us, after we have the impact, again, verify that we've estimated the impact correctly. It helps us set a clear vision for the research and make sure that it will be used. And also it helps us get some concrete ideas about what would be the right deliverables at the end of the project. So this is the actual result of the workshop. You have a roadmap for the quarter, or if you decide to do it for longer, however long your planning period is. And then for every one of those stickies, on the side, you have the title of this project and an outcome for each one of them. This is where this 1 hour initial workshop ends, and we enter the maintenance stage. So for maintenance, we do a couple of things, and this is just us as the research team now. First thing we do, we add an exec lane at the top of the project. And the colors are a bit off here, but there is basically a blue lane surrounding these 4 upper projects. And this is to give us a visual clue of the highest priorities. So by looking at this, we can easily see what is the highest priority project at all times. We also keep this lane for ad hoc requests from the leadership team. So sometimes there's something about our users that the CEO wants to know in order to speak to investors. This is going to be really high impact by default. And so even though it's coming in as unplanned work, we want to make sure to put it in that exact lane and get it done before we do other things. We also add a research operations, research ops lane. This is for internal projects that we want to get done this quarter. So things like maintaining the repository, automating our processes, training, things like that. We want to make sure to make time for that. This is the point where we also go back to the company objectives and our own team objectives, just to verify that the items on here reflect those. And we're never going to be able to do all the research and fulfill all the requests coming our way. So we're going to have to sort some out and not do them. And so looking back at the OKRs really helps us do that in an informed way. So we can verify which of these projects, which of these projects are the best ones to get us to our objectives. So we just verify this again by ourselves as the research team, because the product teams don't know what our user research OKRs are when they're setting up these projects. And so finally, after we've made these changes and you have these items that have been kind of deprioritized or postponed, we go back to the teams. We have a biweekly meeting with each team, and we circulate back this kind of finalized version, or finalized for now. Of course, this is a living and breathing thing, and we always make changes to it as we go. We discuss ownership of all the projects. We use RACI a lot of times. Some of you might know it as responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. So we decide who's going to be the main owner of this project, who's going to make sure that it gets executed on time, which roles do we have when executing this. We also make sure that everyone's okay with the things that we won't do, or at least won't do for now, and might carry it over into the next quarter. So what does this look like now? Where are we now with this? This is a screenshot of our Q4 2022 roadmap. This is the real thing. Right now, we also use this roadmap for additional things. We found that it's also really useful for sizing our projects. So around every sticky, you see a little box which indicates the estimated time we think this project would take. It helps us with capacity planning, and it even helps remind us of rituals such as our user research newsletter. And having this all in one view helps us know which projects are planned to be finished when the newsletter is due. So it really helps us not only plan the work ahead, but also plan our research communication now. So yeah, I would say this was one of the really successful changes that we've made in the team. It did really help us reduce unplanned work. It's now really, really rare. We went from being in research debt to research being ahead of product most of the times. We consistently are able to prioritize high impact projects, which we measure by the amount of leadership engagement that we get on our project, on the outcomes of our research. We were able to show how much impact we're leaving on the table by the amount of projects we weren't able to do due to lack of capacity, and that helped us advocate for growing our team this year. And again, I just want to stress, because this is the most important aspect of any work and any change, it really helped me feel more accomplished and more at peace in my work, because I knew what was coming up and I had confidence in that the work and time that I invest will have impact, which is what we really want when we spend time doing work. And now just some final tips. If you wanted to implement something like this in your organization, first of all, trust your knowledge and intuition. Every organization is unique, so something that works for us might not work for you. I'd recommend identifying your specific challenges and then design the steps accordingly. So your process might only have 3 steps instead of 4, or your process might not be collaborative because it wouldn't work for your organization. That's totally fine. Trust what you know about your work in your organization, but do get feedback and adjust along the way. It's really much easier to advocate for a process when people have the feeling that they contributed to it being created. Whoops. Yeah, don't skip the maintenance. This is not a one-off. You can't just do the workshop for 1 hour and then expect the rest of your life to run smoothly as a researcher. You do need to go back to it. You need to readjust. You need to make sure that it's up to date at all times so that it reflects your actual work. And I do recommend not to throw away your won't do's, the projects that you didn't manage to do. You might think, oh, it looks bad, we didn't do everything. Actually, it looks good because it helps you show what kind of things you could have done if you had more people on your team. And finally, for what to do if anyone is rude to you, I defer to Rachel Green, which is Sneeze Muffin.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really like this talk, and I really love the fact that you said how important it is that you feel good after this roadmap that you make, because it's really an important part for us. Feel good and accomplished, and that we're doing the important work. And before we move to the Q&A, I just want to say thank you to the person who just went. Ollie is co-organizing this event, and he's done a lot of work on it. And for the amazing design team here at Autodesk, who has also helped us a lot in organizing and being at the entrance. Thank you. Okay. Just be friendly to that. Here. Let's do some questions.
Where are you sitting? Are you
Okay.
sitting?
You're
Again,
in.
I'm sitting here. Okay.
I'll take these and see if anyone at home has any question, although they're pretty quiet. Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, so some spice on one of the places open.
Should someone run with the mic?
I can.
What are they?
Hello. So basically, like we all know that priority. Sorry. Hey,
Hi.
thank you so much. I just need too excited to start asking a question. So it would be great to get some advice on one of the potential pitfalls of OKRs that I've seen. So we all know that over the course of the year, the priorities always change somehow. And sometimes people end up like running after, like chasing OKRs that aren't necessarily like the smartest places to lead to it more. And I've especially seen like a focus on quantity or quantity in the wrong places, because that's what's certainly the OKR, and you want to be able to check it off and show that you've done well. And seeing that sort of like come into tension with strategic priorities and pivots and impact. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice about how you minimize that.
Yeah.
You have only one mic. So
Wow. Good for your steps.
You can both answer.
Okay, great question. So I think there's two parts.
Can you just repeat the question for that point?
Oh, sure. So the question was basically, what are the pitfalls in using OKRs so we don't just chase objectives and ignore important things beside those objectives?
Oh, so actually, like, what do you do so that that doesn't happen as much? Is that
Yeah.
what
Yeah, so I'll divide it into two. First of all, when setting the objective, it should be a collaborative work. So by doing a lot of collaborative work, you have to really think about what are the objectives that will really contribute to the organization and take into account as many factors as you can. So in advance, try to avoid overlooking things that are important. But then most of the my answer would be most of it, just keep monitoring what you do and how important it is. As I said, this is a tool for us. It's not an end. It's a mean to achieve our end, which is to contribute to the organization. So if major changes are happening, it's a great point to just stop, adjust, and set new key results, new objectives, and respond to whatever happens to the organization. We definitely need to readjust this all the time.
Cool. I guess for me, the answer is usually choose progress over process and apply common sense. I think there are a lot of helpful frameworks, but they only work if you have a clear idea of what is the challenge and what is the actual purpose of a framework. And so I do agree that setting objectives and key results is really helpful, but you might not always have the capacity to do it well. And there's so much research on how to phrase the best objective and the OKR cult almost. I lean heavily on the side of it's important for you to understand what your goals are and why they're important. And if you phrase them in a way that doesn't agree with the OKR ideals, that's okay. So I think just use common sense, and that's the most important thing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah.
How do you deal with dependencies, meaning like OKRs? Some of your OKRs are dependent on other people from other teams. How do you make sure that they actually do what they're supposed to do for you to succeed? Like in Ofer's talk, there was an example that designers need to conduct research by themselves. So do they have an OKR to do that?
Yeah, so the question, how do we cope with dependencies within our OKRs? That means other people have to contribute some of the progress for us to achieve it. And again, a good question. So again, our OKRs are meant to direct us towards achieving some goals. But then if it depends on other people's priorities, that means they have to be aligned with this being a goal. So just taking an example, PMs and designers conducting user tests, it's true that it's partially dependent on them. However, once it's my key result, it is under my responsibility to make sure that I advocate for it. At least for the first time, I nudge people as much as I can. What's your upcoming project? What are the questions that you have to answer in order to create this new design? Okay, are you thinking about user testing? What about the workshop? What about the templates? Are you using it? So you have to advocate for it. That's part of the key result, and that is part of the way of the reason why we set it as execution, even if other people have to be part of this process. So it's our responsibility to promote it. And also, I could give another example as to one of our key results was to integrate a pop-up survey capability, but then product haven't released yet their full version, so it made no sense to integrate this capability. Obviously, we postponed it, and that's fine. That's part of the process, but we were very focused on at least achieving it from our end.
Thank you. Any more questions? Maybe I'll ask one for now. Because I have a question as well. Why not? So I'm actually interested to know, like in both your talks, there's a lot of dependency maybe on other teams or other team members being able to raise the right questions themselves also, or at least some questions, and kind of tell you what kind of research they want and what their needs. Do you have any tips on how to help product designers, product managers understand what the research that they need to do?
What you think about it? Do you have it straight away?
I can try. I mean, so one of the
Question, sorry.
no, I think one of the great thing that you showed, Valeriya, in your talk is the outcome approach. So just speaking about not whether you want to do research, because everyone want to do research. I want to learn if my new design works well. Okay, what's the outcome of the research? What type of decisions will you make based on this research? These are the type of questions that help me generate better understanding about their needs. And also just being in discussion about their OKRs. So one of their challenges, the product leads, design leads, is to establish their own OKRs and being able to see 3 months in advance. That's a challenge for everyone, and it's a challenge for them as well. But everyone needs to work together, and we need to understand that until they don't align their OKRs to the upcoming month, it would be very difficult for us to support them.
Yeah, I want to speak to another aspect of your question, I think, and that is what to do if you have a not very research mature team. You have people who have never worked with user research before. They don't even really know what to expect and how you can help them. So I think for that, maybe before going into, let's say for my talk, before going into these collaborative things, when we onboard new PMs and new designers to the team, I have a lot of resources that I make sure to meet with them. I make sure to introduce myself, to answer any of their spontaneous questions, to have a connection. And then I share with them resources. So we have written down what user research is, what is our mission in this organization, how do we see ourselves, what kind of things we help with in general. So to help kind of create a baseline for what we do. And then have conversations and give them examples of previous work we've done. So we have a research repository where people who join the company are able to look at previous research work we've done and get inspired as to what kind of things are possible. So I think it's really good to kind of, yeah, if someone has just joined our organization yesterday and have never worked with research before, I wouldn't pull them into a workshop cold turkey. Yeah, so it kind of, I think there is this kind of exercise assumes a lot of background work and a lot of presence of research in the company. So when I first implemented this in our company, all of our PMs and designers have already been working with me for at least a couple months. And so they had various levels of understanding of what research is. and what is good research, but all of them had at least a basic level. And then for our case, it's collaborative, it's a workshop, so people can ask questions. If I'm giving them a task to brainstorm research projects or questions and they don't know what it is, they can ask and we can discuss it together. People can bring up their own examples and check if that's what is meant by a research question.
Thanks. And actually, as part of your roadmap, you have like a part of research operations or kind of management of research, which I think is great because you don't always actually put it in the roadmap. It's almost like something that we need to do, but it's not part of our actual roadmap. So yeah, it's great. Any more questions? Don't be shy.
I have a question.
Sure.
So do you guys see the UX research profession as necessarily siloed? Because I have experienced that it's extremely imperative for UX design and other processes in the product cycle. So do you believe that it necessarily has to be siloed or and specialized, or can it be combined into other roles?
Do you mean UX research has to be a dedicated role
Yes.
instead of
Like just
designers doing the research?
Cool. I need to repeat the question, right?
You just said it, I think, so it's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, cool. So I have an opinion. It's not necessarily like the way to go. I think it depends. I've seen designers that were highly proficient in doing research, that had a lot of skill and were able to cover all of their product, team internal discovery and testing by themselves. And if that in their organization is what they need and they don't have maybe a need for strategic research, maybe they have other, basically I do think there is a need for research. I don't always think that a UX researcher specifically has to do it. It has to be someone who has the skill. It could be that these tasks are divided differently. So there is a market researcher who has great research skills, who takes care of a lot of the strategic projects. And there's a design researcher who takes care of all of their team research. In that case, if the work gets done, great. I might be like digging myself a grave here. So yeah, I don't think that for me, I don't think it's necessarily a UX researcher. I don't think it's important what the function is called. I think it's important that the work gets done.
From my standpoint, it's always a question of alternatives. So obviously, if you don't have the resources and a designer knows how to conduct their own research well, and this leads to great result, that's great. But ideally, I think definitely should have a UX researcher. Again, as Valeriya said, doesn't have to do all the research, but at least be there as the profession stakeholder that can promote this profession, just like content design is important for companies or a professional analyst, and not just PMs doing all of this work all together. So again, it's just a matter of choices and alternatives within resources.
I want to add something and contradict myself a little bit. Here we go. So I think, yes, it's important that the work gets done. And generally, I think it's not important who does it. The problem that I think we see a lot where there is no researcher present is that no one has the ownership and it's no one's priority. So that's what's really changed in an organization when someone has the time and the capacity and the will to create a research roadmap. So we might have a designer who knows how to run tests and does it really well, but it's not part of their job description and it's not how their success is being measured. They're not going to invest time into research OKRs and research roadmaps and advocate for research on a company level. So I think the work on a project level could get done by other people, but the question is like, how mature do you want the function to be, and how far do you want it to go?
And I'll add one more thing that you mentioned maybe in the beginning about strategic research, because yeah, I think that designers can be
great at doing research on their own product, but then there's no one who will do the strategic level research, which is also important because there's just won't be any function for it. We have time for one more question.
Ooh,
Okay. Yeah, I'll bring it to you.
we have 2 questions.
You propose your own projects, especially at the company level.
Do we propose?
Proactive projects.
Yeah,
Oh.
do you propose yourselves the projects?
Yes.
Yes.
So I said yes.
Yes, short answer, definitely yes. I think one of our roles and one of our privilege is that we work with different teams, and often we're the one who spot like opportunities to create value. And definitely it's something that with the approach that we bring to the table, not necessarily PMs or designers will spot this opportunity the same as we do.
This was short, so we can. Yes.
Can you share any experiences getting buy-in for office work and creating a roadmap or creating OKRs? Because I know that with OKRs, it's like a really busy time for the stakeholders themselves that need to work on their own OKRs, or they don't, like sometimes they're not even sure yet about the value of research. So investing on the meta of research, that's also a challenge. So I'm curious to hear about your experiences.
Just repeat the question, please. Sure.
Okay. Okay, so the question was,
Tips on buying.
yeah, tips on buy-in when resources are low, everyone's focused on creating their own OKRs and so on. How do you get people to invest into creating research OKRs and roadmaps? Cool, good question. So for us, we set our OKRs ourselves as a research team. So we're not really taking away anyone's resource to do that. And I simply haven't had the problem circulating them afterwards. Usually, as long as they're aligned with the company OKRs, everyone's happy with it. So it's literally just a matter of communicating them. And as when it comes to the roadmap, which is a collaborative thing, we said that after the OKRs and the team OKRs and roadmap are set. So usually we set it just before the team are starting to work. And the first time that I had to advocate it and I invited people to this initial workshop, I basically explained to them what the problem was, and they saw the problem firsthand, which is last year, the situation of someone coming to me saying, could we do this? And we need this like ASAP, or we need this in 2 weeks. And I'm currently in the middle of another project and I just cannot do it, meaning that they have to change their own roadmap plans or go without it. This problem was something that they were very aware of. And so it was quite easy to just remind them of the way that we're working. It's not ideal. It's not working out. It's a pain, not just for research, it's a pain for your team. And that was enough to get people on board.
I think it depends on the level of familiarity that stakeholders have with research deliverables. If they are extremely familiar and we work a lot together, then just by saying, hey, we're gonna start creating OKRs for research, let's talk about your plans for the upcoming quarter, so we will be able to better align with your goals. That's a great buy-in for a stakeholder, because he's going to want your attention and he will want to advocate why he needs you most. But even if you haven't collaborated or there are some questions about the effectiveness of research, so just conduct it as more of an intake conversation and talk about what are their challenges, what questions are, what bothers them, what prevents them from for creating progress. And that will definitely also help us as researcher kind of understand what are their needs, and start from the kind of the I don't know, domain leads level, not obviously head of product if it's a big company, but also not PMs. something in between, the level that needs to promote objectives and has also a large team and a lot to gain from getting research buy-in. So.
Great. A lot of content. So again, thank you so much for presenting your work and your research process and for answering all the questions. And thank you all so much for coming here, and also for people who joined online at home. It was great seeing all of you and seeing the interest, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.
Yeah.
And you're welcome to stay a bit and chat. And that's it.
Thank you, Sigal.